We're gonna call the general government meeting to order. Motion to approve the agenda.
Make motion to approve the agenda.
Thanks. Any discussion on the agenda?
Is there, we still, like Supervisor Olson, or still discussing it?
I think he asked that if we can still discuss it. I think it'd be wise to go ahead and discuss it. I cannot deliver the impact that Mr. Olson can, I'm sure, but I'll give just a general overview of what he's thinking. His resolution, and then we begin the discussion in this group to comment, maybe give staff direction as to which types of options we want.
And just for time, because I had suggested item number 8. Can we just roll that into number 9 since that'll probably be naturally part of that discussion?
I think that makes sense.
And we don't need to separate them out.
Either way. Anything else on the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Our minutes for October 10th meeting. Move to approve.
Second.
Question on the minutes? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Are there any public comments? Any supervisors not seated as committee members? Public presentation regarding the 2023 budget administration.
Morning, everyone. Snowy out there. If you turn to your packet, there's a budget resolution. Page 6, I believe. That's sort of 2 agenda items. The second one will be your opportunity to affirm the budget resolution and pass it on to the board if you so choose. But for the moment, what I'd like to do is talk about some of the detailed information in here, if I could. So that includes discussion of what we call technical amendments. So at the administrator's presentation on October 18th, you heard the broad overview of the budget. What happens from that point forward? Sometimes there's some things that we didn't catch. We want to bring those to your attention. And I'd like to bring 3 of those up for you right now. The first is on line 108 of page 7. It was previously reported that 7 step increases for positions would be included in the 2023 budget. So what's a step increase? A step increase is a situation where an employee is taking on more responsibility. Same sort of general role, but as an example, might be supervising employees when they haven't supervised employees before. And what we do in that case is they move up a pay grade. So as an example, the CJCC coordinator, Melissa Fisher, has taken on responsibility for the case managers, and she's moving from a grade 18 to a grade 19. With that, there's some pay increase along with that responsibility. Way back in September, possibly in August, we were talking about having 7 of those across the county. We ended up having 9. One was for the HR director, we've had HR directors in the past. What we did is we decided we needed to take the HR manager position and elevate it to HR director. So that was salary neutral, and we just missed the fact that the board required an acknowledgement of a step increase. There was no monetary difference between the pay of the HR manager and the HR director in this particular case. But that HR director position was not reported back in August and September. So that's one of those step increases that we missed. The other one was very similar in that over in Community Services Division, they were taking an existing FTE and they had money to elevate that position up to a DCF, Department of Children and Families manager. We did not announce that. So same sort of situation, different responsibilities. There was no monetary difference across that step increase or grade level increase either. And we just simply failed to report that to you. So that's technical correction number one. Any questions on that? Connie, did I get that approximately correct with CSD's perspective?
Well,
CSD's position?
It's on a different pay scale, so there would be some monetary difference. We were able to
Very
absorb it. in-
Thank you. Okay, technical correction number two. The list of capital improvements to be undertaken by GAM, Golden Age Manor, the county's capital improvement plan, included certain mislabeled items. The mislabeling has been corrected. These improvements added up to about $200,000. We just had misnamed some of those improvements.
Where you're looking.
I'm sorry, this is now on line 113, technical correction number two. And it spills over to the next page.
Gotcha.
Okay. So, as an example, bariatric bed was included, not buying a bariatric bed, they're buying something else. But the total amount of capital improvements was, in terms of expense, was no different, $200,000. Technical correction number three. So the income statement of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council previously showed projected grant monies that exceeded by $24,400 what we are actually likely to receive from the Department of Justice. So we over budgeted. We're not actually we're unlikely to get the money that we put in the budget, CJCC, by about $24,400. So in this case, the monies will be replaced either by drawing from levy or from the administrator's contingency. So that'll be covered. Any questions about that one? All right, so tomorrow we'll have an opportunity to pass the budget. We're required by statute to pass the budget. And this resolution that we've just been reviewing some of the details for is the way we get that done. So it would be wonderful if the General Government Committee would consider ratifying the resolution, passing it forward to the board. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the resolution itself. Generally speaking, these are pretty much the same year to year, except for the list of technical corrections and amendments. We just provided three. I don't know what they've done in the past because I haven't been here. But another thing about the resolution that's important, it also gives license to directors to apply for certain grant monies. So for public works projects, for community service, for the sheriff's office. And there's a lot of environmental services. There's a lot of detail in this resolution that is specific to those departments or divisions and the kinds of things that they're going to request in the new budget year. But we have to give them that license to do so, or you do. So.
All right, we
Any
get a
questions?
motion.
Make a motion to approve resolution 47.
Any further discussion on the motion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. All right. I think we actually covered two items there. We'll have a discussion regarding the housing in Polk County, and then if we choose, we can, after discussion or prior, we can get a motion on a resolution 40 or 22. Who's gonna lead us in the discussion?
I think Vince, I think you should probably introduce what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah,
It can be supported by the other.
I think what we learned at the last board meeting was that there's tremendous interest, actually prior to the board meeting, in helping or assisting communities in developing affordable housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, senior housing, all of the above, so to speak. With that, we had one resolution that was introduced that did not proceed for a vote. And since then, Mr. Olson has come back to, as he was running, kind of led the initiative to block it, came back and said, it's not that. He goes, I believe in housing and it should be an important goal, but it should be a plan that is more sustainable and maybe makes more sense and doesn't target one type of housing. So I can't speak for Olson. as well as he could. But he did raise a proposed resolution. I wouldn't even call it a resolution. He put in some bullet points that we'll discuss here a little bit later. But he just thought it might be something for this committee to discuss and move forward. Now, in the meantime, I have looked around and said, can I find anything that might be of spur some thought for our county? I do have, and I'll pass this around, something from Washington County, which is another type of plan. It's what they call a down payment assistance loan, which got me thinking that it would be designed for folks who want to build a home or improve their home with parameters. So it might be a parameter of how much money can be spent, how much can be borrowed. And in this case, if it were a 10,000 down payment assistance loan that a person could take to a developer to say, I've got 10,000 plus I've already saved 20,000, I can put 30,000 down. It's a loan that might get a buyer to say, yes, I'm gonna build this, and it might get a developer to say, okay, I'll put faith in this person. It's probably a good bet. And this loan, in this case, is a 0% interest, but after so many years, if the person is kind of an upstanding citizen, participates in volunteer work, contributes to the community in certain ways, that loan is forgiven after so many years. So that is just one option there. It could also, I suppose, be used for maybe if a developer is saying, I want to build a rental apartment. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be seniors. It doesn't have to be unemployed. It doesn't have to be, workforce. It could be any of those, but it does limit. So that's just something I found that I thought you might be interested. In terms of Mr. Olson, did you pass out the copy of the bullet points?
Well,
I didn't see it in the packet.
No.
so he sent, I guess, bullet points. I put it into a draft resolution, and then he and I have gone back and forth emailing where he wants me to, I thought he was gonna be here today.
He called this morning, said he couldn't.
And so I can certainly pass out what I've drafted. However, he's come back with several things in an email saying he wants me to change it. So I would be passing out something that's premature. But I can give you some general idea. He wants it to be a loan to municipalities. His initial thought was a 2% loan. Minimum of 4-unit developments. So I don't know if that means like a 4-plex or 4 individual houses. Maximum of 1,500 square feet per house. He says maximum footprint of finished living space. I don't know if that he means the footprint is 1,500 and we can have different stories, or if it's just one like a slab on grade idea. And then the way that he initially put it together, it was to instruct the administrator to go out and sort of develop a program, but with these limiting parameters. And so I don't know if I could print out his email with changes that he wants and my draft that you guys have looked at. I can certainly ask somebody from my office to print those, but I believe it would be.
It was very vague, or I guess bullet pointing, but yeah, I think what you said is right, that the idea is it's a municipality that's going to take the money from us. Just if they say, we have a development, we have somebody ready to build. It also would say a municipality is one that's going to have to get engaged in terms of infrastructure and be involved for the land or something like that. So it gets a municipality involved. If you go back to the housing study that was done a few years ago, and they have what they call their toolbox, it really is a toolbox for local government and local organizations, not for a county necessarily. But this would enable a community, let's say, just as an example, since we're here, Balsam Lake, to say, hey, developer, we've got land over here on the other side of, or behind the 46 store. How about we can give you a $10,000 loan per unit. So if he builds 4, 8 homes, that'll be basically a low interest loan that could be paid back over time. That way it is a sustainable program. I think his concern with the last resolution was it was $1.5 million a lot, and it wasn't sustainable in that it only paid back half. So his idea is, how can we get a municipality involved, give them a loan, which they do pay back. The details aren't there in terms of when would they start paying back, what the interest rate is. I think he suggested 2%. And a maximum of 70,000 per municipality. So any municipality that wants to jump in on this could get involved. And that way, it's so that, you know, I think his total was $200,000. That's just a starting point to say, if we commit $200,000, say in 2024 to a municipality, 70,000 total in a municipality, they could guarantee a developer or homeowners so much money to help them get started. And then after so many years, he didn't know if it's after 2 years, after 10 years, or whatever, they have to start, the municipality starts to pay us back.
There was a couple of counties that presented in the Wisconsin County conference, and they were larger counties than us. So of course the money was millions versus hundreds of thousands, but it was interesting because they did have similar approaches where the municipality actually had land available for for building set aside, and one of them, but I could talk to them and pull down those presentations too, because they were kind of interesting to see what they were doing, although it was on a different scale because of these were counties in the southern part of the state that were quite a bit more, bigger population.
Yeah.
But
And I think it's, based on, and I told Ryan this last month, was just the beginning. Even though that resolution went down, it really did start, I think, a momentum or a movement within the board to say, yep, let's do something. So, if I have any acknowledgement from you or the board, we're going to start digging into this more to say, okay, what specifically might work, and we'll come back with something on a housing. I do like Mr. Olson's ideas about a sustainable program. It's $200,000 that does get paid back to us. It's not just handing out money, kind of a first come, first serve, but rather it goes out to a municipality. They have to invest. And that was the hard thing with the last one, was you had individuals saying, this sounds like a good idea, but we didn't have a municipality or a builder saying, I'm in. And yes, we'll put those sewers in. Yes, we'll break ground and we'll buy them. We didn't have that yet. And so this gets that municipality, if they want it, they can apply for this money and use it as they see fit, so to speak. And to whatever it would take to get that local developer or whomever to start developing. If St. Croix Falls says we need senior housing, that's what they go with. If Milltown says, or Amory, I remember in the housing study, they were different than the other communities. They didn't want starter homes. They wanted apartments. They had so many young people in the area that were just starting out in the factories and so on. We just need apartments. And so they could entice a developer to put in a fourplex or whatever.
So the municipality would be applying for a 2% loan from the county. So I'm thinking about a place like Milltown, who has developers that are already discussing developments that they want to happen. Like this is actually a thing. It's not a theoretical. and let's say Milltown would apply for that 2% loan, aren't we just shifting then the burden of like, if then how is Milltown going to generate the money to pay back the county? If they're incentivizing that builder, then we're just kind of shifting that burden over to the village of Milltown. And they would have to come up with a way to pay that loan back.
Village has the most to gain by having the additional tax base in their municipality.
I agree.
I mean, I think it's a lot easier pill for our constituents to swallow if the fact that it's a loan and it's not just something we're giving to somebody else. If I'm a resident here and I'm born and raised here, I worked here, I paid my own. We're not just giving it to somebody to give them a start, we're giving it to municipality for growth. For those purposes, I think it's a lot easier pill to swallow for the constituents on their end.
I suppose the municipality could loan the money.
They can do whatever they want at that point, as long as they're approved for the loan.
So at that point, though, we're talking about giving a loan for a municipality to get involved. The issue that we're trying, like, we need to figure out what problem we're trying to solve, because builders have access to money. Builders have access to cheap money. That's not an issue that we're trying to solve. So that's where I'm getting a little bit hung up with a low interest loan, is because from conversations that EDC has had with builders and other stakeholders, there's no problem with them gaining access to money or having the capital to do something. It's the viability of the project and the cost of the project. So that's where we're kind of coming at a little bit of a disconnect. What we've heard from people who be implementing these projects, but what would help, push them across the finish line, starting line. Again, I like that we're talking about it. I would just be, my curiosity and the questions that I had for Supervisor Olson, if he was here, was, what conversations have been had about, or what conversations have been had with municipalities or builders or anything like that to get to this point. Because again, theoretically, I agree with the idea. It's just, I'm wondering where the effectiveness.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions too, is we would, much like Terry did on the last proposal, talk to villages, cities to say, what's your take on it? Like in that case, it takes a little time to get folks to understand the develop. I think what Brad wanted was this to be a starting point. That's why he didn't have a resolution. He's not ready to bring a resolution, but he put it in kind of a bullet point form for us to say, could this be a resolution to get a discussion going?
Well, the municipality has to have the appetite. I mean, if they don't have the appetite to do it, then we're barking up the wrong tree. Anyway, for the same other reasons, the infrastructure and all that's required to do that.
And I think his $200,000 maximum is just there so that the county doesn't commit an excessive amount of money that's going to be sitting there for a while.
See what happens.
And I suppose it's one of those things that we, what if we made it a municipality of a 0% loan or 5% loan? It doesn't matter. Whatever might get that municipality thinking and talking to the local developer or a developer to say, hey, we're in, we'll help you. We can get you free money as a loan. And we want to, depending on the situation, you would hope they would say, we like the idea, we need housing. Let's move this thing forward with a, the offer of land or infrastructure or whatever. And we have a lot of villages and cities saying, I'm all for housing, bring it in, how can we help? Sometimes it's a matter of just giving them that first little spark.
I gotta work backwards a little bit with this, so, because I want to make sure that I'm on the same page as everybody else, vice versa. So that West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission study, right? That was finished in 2020, right? The study says 2020 on the
Yeah,
cover.
right.
So it's using data from around 2017, 2018. How much stock because that's what I've been using to study up on the needs of the county, is the study that they put out, as well as discussions with Balsam Lake and Middletown. That's where, when I'm talking about like the identified needs and things like that, that's the stuff where I'm informing those things based off of that study. You know, like you said, they have that toolbox. They also have their recommendations, what we address and how we address them. And they don't necessarily tell us straight up, here's exactly what you should do, but they say, here's your menu of options. Here's the different things that you should keep in mind. So we had mentioned just a little bit ago about municipalities needing to have the appetite. That study outlines the appetite. So appetite also meeting the need or the demand for housing. That study outlines in detail what exists for demand and need. So I mean, we know what's there, and I get the idea that municipalities would have to have the want to do it, but I also just question whether or not. So if I go to Middletown Village Board meeting, you know, they're talking about a ton of other things. They're not talking about the need for housing, and I don't think it's because they don't need it. It's just it's not something that maybe they don't even know that they can be talking. There's opportunity.
So maybe it's my impression back then was when the toolbox and the strategies were presented, village, and not just Polk County, but other counties that I observed, they didn't know what to do with it. Maybe they didn't have the expertise to say, let's move forward.
Ask how much that study costs.
I mean, it wasn't a full boat. We paid for all of it. I think the EDC.
The municipalities paid part of it too.
But I think I guess if I had a vision, it would be that the county would take a kind of a leadership role in developing the initial steps of a program that we could then introduce to the communities and then say, would you consider options? How, if this is important to you, Osceola, what else can you do? Where's your land? What could happen? And so that's, and I'm trying to speak for Mr. Olson, and obviously he's not here.
And I love the idea of finding a way to get the municipalities involved much earlier in the process, get in the game that way, and having them say, like, this is something that we want, and here's how we're going to commit to it. I do love the idea of that. I think in general, we all might be a little bit further ahead than we should be in what we're trying to figure out, because through different committees and different discussions, we've found that there are great needs at different levels. So we have great need for low income housing. We have a great need for workforce housing. We have a great need for senior housing. And that's why certain, not just this last resolution at the last board meeting, that's why certain efforts have been targeted at specific types of housing. So I do think we should also kind of, as a group, if we do agree that this is something that we should address, I think we should figure out what specific things we want to address, how we're going to address them. Because otherwise we're going to come up with something that is not, if we don't target something directly and we just leave it as this broad program to, you know, maybe build a house here or there, I don't think we're moving towards moving the needle at all or solving any problems. So I think as a group, we need to figure out what it is that we want to address and then go from there to figure out how we're. And that's where, and then this isn't an argument to say that I want to return to focusing on senior housing. That's just my explanation of why an effort focused on senior housing or why another effort might focus on low income housing. Because we're not going to be able, I hope what people understand is that we're not going to be able to put one effort out on something and then call it a day and housing is solved.
No. Probably the next step would, I would like to kind of get my staff engaged, maybe some of the supervisors engaged, Terry engaged, and let us come back with some potential steps. I'll work with Olson, Brian, maybe get you involved. We can drag Terry back into this mess. Just to bounce off some ideas, we'll look at what other counties have done, if you can find what you have. And I'm not sure we'll come up with the answer, so to speak, but I think we can talk about different options. And my emphasis will be that we don't jump at the first idea that comes along, but rather we jump at the right idea. Because if we say we're going to commit to housing and we're going to do something, we can come up with a lot of bad ideas, and I don't want to pass those. I don't want you all to do it just because, hey, it may help housing. Let us come together, and I don't know, where we'll tweak it is it going to be low income housing? Is it going to be workforce housing? Is it going to be senior housing? People have different ideas of what the priority is.
Each community, I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think each community might have different, what they view as different
That's a
than
very good
another
point.
community. Like St. Croix Falls now, they just approved and are doing a tiny house community, 16 house thing. And, I hope it works out. It might be good for, I think of the 16 lots, 12 of them are already reserved. So they're moving forward, but there's interest there. But at the same token, you've got, like Centuria or Milltown or some of the smaller communities that might be different needs. So I don't think we can come up with a one size fits every community, but I do like that we get the communities more involved.
The unfortunate thing is the problem is bad enough that problems overlap from community to community, state to state, nationwide. So there are things that like exist everywhere, but yeah, we have differences in communities.
Well, maybe if, Mr. Chair, if there were a nomination to have staff move forward, to develop a committee and come back with kind of results of what we're finding out and developing a plan that would get municipalities involved in developing their own housing schemes.
Could I suggest? Basically, we've kind of talked, kind of like we did with the mobile command center. We came up with a menu of things, that solved that problem that ranged from on the budget side, the low end to the high end. And I'm not talking about budget wise, but this committee could potentially, and I'm not going to break my heart if this is the direction we go, just a suggestion while we're talking about it. This committee could come up with essentially a menu of things that address low income workforce and senior housing. So then we can kind of look at what available options there are for solutions to different problems, how they would affect, communities singularly and county as a whole and things like that. So that committee could come up with, instead of maybe trying to narrow right away, come up with a 10,000 foot view of several different options that we have so we can kind of evaluate how that could ripple throughout the. I like that. I mean, I like the committee idea and getting everybody together to kind of figure out what we're going to do. We can kind of address the issue as a whole rather than trying to corner one piece of it.
So would you be assigning then general government, this committee to be kind of a catch-all? Because, if we're talking money, this committee is the deciding committee, right? That recommends to the county board. But when we're talking about broad policy, I just don't know how that would fit here specifically. You've got Health and Human Services, they look at a certain aspect of housing and how it impacts, quality of life. And then is are you asking that Gen Gov be given sort of this unique?
No, I was just tagging along to Vince's suggestion of staff coming up or creating a committee like
Oh,
that.
a separate, okay.
Yeah, not Gen Gov in particular or any other committee, but just kind of adding on to Vince's idea of what that committee could do.
Yeah, I think that's a good first start is to look at maybe to get a little more detail in terms of what other options, what other counties maybe have tried. If I can find, I haven't found a lot, to be honest. So, but we
We
can
got
look at
this,
the
I know Bayfield.
yeah, so, I mean, we can look at things and it'll give you the opportunity and it's just a committee to bounce it off of to say what, and then if we decide that, hey, this seems to make sense, we can start developing a resolution or a program to engage.
Would we need anything on this committee's end to start that effort?
I think if I sense a consensus, we'll start doing that. I'm getting a consensus, I think, from the full board, everybody that, since the last meeting, I've had a variety of calls that kind of feel like this is an important topic that we should engage on. Even though it's not what you'd call a county mandate, or in our statutory authority to look at housing. I think it's something that we can take a leadership role in and propose an action.
Anybody else want to comment?
So would that committee then come back to this committee? With their,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is nothing, I think it's just more of a call to arms, so to speak, of let's put together some heads, let's start thinking about it, much like Terry did with the senior housing. And that was a great idea, but maybe we take that and we devise it more toward open it up to all types of housing. And then I think that's where Olson's resolution, I thought, made a lot of sense. Is it lets the community decide what type of housing, or lets the market decide what type of housing people are going to invest in. I'm getting the same look that Terry got when he.
I will say that one of the challenges we'll continue to run into, and I know people don't like when I push this point, but if we keep talking, we've identified what the needs are. We have people that come in and tell us that one of the biggest barriers to people gaining employment and living and working in Polk County is the lack of available housing. And letting the market decide, I know trust me, I swear on my life, I'm with you. But when Joe Developer can just make more money by developing elsewhere, that is the market deciding. And when we've got people who are telling us that single people who don't qualify for low-income housing are unable to find housing in this area, we've identified like the needs and the opportunities that can be filled when people start to move in to this area and fill jobs, and so property taxes will change. Revenues will change in areas and things like that. So it's going to be a balancing act of, like I said, I promise I'm not ever going to push back on what the markets are dictating. But there's also some things sometimes where we might have to, like you said, be a leader in what's needed when we've identified it time and time again.
I don't hear any objections, so I'll take that as a consensus that we'll let me start working on this, and we'll put it on future meeting agendas just to say kind of where we are. I don't think we're going to come up with anything next month with the answer, but we're going to at least start moving in that direction.
And what you're saying is you're going to form a committee that's going to try to centralize or at least find all the needs that we have, all the potential answers to those needs and something at one location. There's things out there now that are happening
Yeah.
that we're not aware of. Employers are making housing available to a potential employee in the area. We're not familiar with that. That should be a definite part of this.
Yeah,
There are several employers most recently that have bought properties to house employees.
Sure, and we should be participating and encouraging and helping. I don't know, do they have an association of employers in the area that can all come together and say, hey, if you've got something I wanted, and then we can adjust accordingly. The needs, like Ryan's talking about, that's one specific need. My God, I'll guarantee you that we can identify every need in housing that anybody encounters.
Yeah.
And we can justify it in this county with a need for senior, singles, low income. Every need is necessary here. It's here. We need it.
I don't want to overpromise because this is just a portion of that housing study. We're not going to redo this whole housing study. We also know from HHS that we started talking about the homeless or the unhoused, low income. And there's no easy definition of what it is. There are a lot of numbers out there, but they all are defined by something else. So I think what I guess what I'm leaning toward is one of the areas that is most important in this county is workforce housing. Most of those are borderline low income. Let me target in that area first. But looking at the whole gamut of what's available, whether it be apartments, homes, small homes, senior housing, which can have an effect. Let me start there, because if you guys are expecting me to come back with the answer to the definition of what homeless is and all, I don't want to do that because HHS is working on those things.
That's defined already, basically.
Well, yeah, but you know what you call as an unhoused, another person may not. That's why you had all these different definitions of home.
What you're talking about is going to be the most acceptable to the public and understandable.
Right.
Housing for employers that will help and coordinate a workforce.
Yeah.
And accommodate them. That's the most acceptable approach that we could have, I believe. For a starter.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain that, well, like human services try to come up with a single that's living in a car tonight and tomorrow night he's living with a neighbor and so on. It's hard to put a number on those that are out there. And but they will all be accommodated if your approach is successful in any manner. Employment, housing for that specific group. And I think we'll get a good acceptance from the public. We'll get a good acceptance from the communities that want to expand their employment and expand their base, basically. I think that's probably something that we could understand. Right now, we've got all kinds of different problems and all kinds of approaches. And to try to determine what is going to solve any more than one of them at a time, like Ryan's talking about, we've got to zero in on it, but let's zero in the most acceptable one that's available or could be available. And get started. And getting a group together and starting to culminate some ideas is excellent.
All right, well, we're not ready for any resolution. I guess we see one on the agenda next month,
We'll have the topic on
discuss
the
it.
agenda.
Yeah, just the topic.
And if Brad wants, or anybody wants to introduce the resolution,
Yeah.
certainly they can.
Right now, we don't have.
Yeah.
All right, how about our work plan? Anything we need to update or review on the work plan?
Yeah, we've got a couple. At least.
So I'm just looking at page 5 of the packet and the list of what was planned back at the beginning of the year. And I'd like to get some feedback from you on a couple of ideas. So the first bullet point in December is develop 2023 draft work plan. A work plan will come up with a draft that you to fill in. The second bullet is review financial policy. We've started our finance team to examine the current financial policy and sort of redline areas where we think some change needs to be done. We'll bring some of those issues to you in December. Investment policy. We will have to find this. I'm sort of joking about this, but one of the conversations I had with Chad was that we really didn't have an investment policy that was that helped guide general government director in terms of risk and return. So we will find what we have and we will bring it forward to you, but it may be a little bit heavier lift than this 3-word bullet item suggests. The 4th bullet item is review personnel and IT policies. We are on track to hire a HR director, and I would recommend that we let this person participate in the consideration of our current personnel policy, fresh eyes. And so if you're willing for us to push that down into the 2023 work plan, I think that would be beneficial. And I will work with Scott Good, find out where he stands with IT policies and give you a report back in December on where we are with that and whether we're going to have anything for you to consider. I don't think that's in tough shape at all, but we're going to have a pretty big agenda with respect to policies in December. So that may be one we want to push because I don't think it's really something that we need to be overly concerned about right now. If you have a different opinion, we will bring IT policy to you in December. But that feels to me like something we could push to January. We also have, this is possibly to the next agenda item, but I'll mention it. Back in September, we discussed how Old Age Manor was likely to have a resolution for a write-off. It had been quite a few years since they had a resolution like that because we had not been sort of keeping an eye on their bad debt. But we will put on the work plan for 2023 to consider that after 3rd quarter of each year, so we don't lose track of it like we did there. And we'll also ask you to consider a resolution to relieve to write off some bad debt of about $155,000 at Scott. So that's more to the agenda than it is to the work plan, but I thought I'd bring it up.
We'll also talk about, next month, we'll talk about future 2023 work items. Things like, well, I'll just throw a teaser out there. We need to relook, I think, the broadband resolution we're supporting. We've got those funds that are still available, but yet we still have gaps. And I think we can tweak it or rewrite another broadband resolution, which would help expand broadband.
It's interesting, like Lakeland has been laying fiber all over St. Croix Falls. All the roads almost now have fiber. But you can't tap into it. They won't even give you an estimate to bring it into your house. So
We're not really
sorry.
conversation on broadband. Just a potential future.
Yeah.
And a lot of these will repeat. A lot of these we do every year.
Yeah.
As
Oh,
a
yeah.
committee, so.
Yep.
It'll just be, there, a few of them that I'm taking care of will drop off. Things that need to be addressed will be added. How about subject matters for our next meeting? We're gonna keep the housing on.
Yeah.
Would that just move like an update from minutes then, or?
Unless there's a resolution. I mean,
Yeah.
forwards a resolution, we deal with it.
Right. As far as this discussion goes, I think we can kind of make.
I'll just provide an update. What we're doing.
Well. Anything else? I'll have one item to go. Oh, you got something else?
Do you, do we want to talk about a review, and we don't have to, but we could talk about MOUs? Where we do have a financial, we've really done that with the budget, so,
Will be included in there.
yeah. We're doing it, the reason I bring it up is we're doing it with the executive committee. Some of those that don't have financial limitations, like, we're looking at one with the Friends of the Gandhi on maintenance of that, so, generally, the finances involved.
Didn't we make it an effort a few years ago? We start to review them so they don't get 15, 20 years old and outdated.
Yeah,
So we kind of,
we
keep
kind of
up to
changed our
them.
policy on that. Instead of having a non-ending MOUs, we now end them every year.
yeah,
So
but we could put MOUs on.
I would
Is
say
there something we need to,
sometime next year.
for review for this committee?
Because many are coming up for renewal now. Like,
That's true.
like information center. and so
How many are there?
Wow.
There's a lot.
I know.
We narrowed it down from hundreds to, I mean, an MOU is any little contract or agreement.
Yeah.
But the financial ones, so you think about kinship, tourism, EDC, regional planning, you've got a handful of significant ones. We might want to look at EDC, tourism. What's another one?
The fair.
The fair, of course, the fair is in negotiations right
Yeah.
now. So, we could bring, do you want me to bring copies of those next month?
Well, especially the ones that this committee will be reviewing.
Okay.
Any other subject matters? Item one.
Make the motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nine, so.